3 months ago I shared with you that 911 Carrera prices started to weaken and that it was likely that the market was about to turn.
Not a crash, but a turn. At the time, we saw prices just beginning to edge down, with cars selling slightly below previous levels.
Fast forward to today and we can clearly see that the market has turned.
Prices have continued to soften. Cars are taking longer to sell, and in cases where they sit on the market, they're selling with larger discounts.
However, the extent to which prices soften depends very much on which part of the market you're looking at.
And that distinction is crucial. If you're looking to buy a 911 Carrera, understanding the latest price developments and how they break down by segment can easily save you thousands of dollars.
Let's take a closer look.
To understand where the Carrera market is heading, we need to start with the 992.1, because that's where the pressure is building. Prices of course increased during the pandemic and topped in 2022. What followed was a relatively large decline, akin to what we saw in the rest of the car market. In 2023 the decline slowed, only to increase slightly during 2024.
And that brings us to 2025, the year in which the market turned.
Prices started to increase. Most likely this was a result of the MSRP increases Porsche implemented. But during the second half of 2025, the price increase started to slow down, and in December, I shared with you that the trend could be about to change.
Now that we're in 2026, we can indeed see that prices started to fall. The last time that this happened was the end of 2024.
Prices dropped by 3.6% in the base market and 1.7% in the S market. These price drops are statistically confirmed, meaning that it's unlikely to be the result of chance. Using the trend line, the year-over-year change is still positive at 1.5 and 0.9% respectively, but it is the short-term development that matters here. The price trend for the GTS, T and four-wheel driven variants looks similar.
As you can see, the market weakened and the trend turned. But take note that this isn't a crash. In fact, Carreras are still expensive and many of you might feel like nothing has changed. But that's because prices move different in different parts of the market.
If we zoom into the model year breakdown for the S model, we can see that it's the latest model year that suffered the most. Prices for 2024 cars are lower than 1 year ago. 2023 and 2022 cars decreased slightly from their market top, and 2021 and 2020 cars were fairly stable. This makes sense, right? The general rule of thumb is that a new car loses value quicker than an old car. Similar patterns are then also visible in the base market. Dynamics in the 992.2 market are similar to the latest 992.1 cars. We can see that prices increased slightly in the first half of 2025, but have been decreasing since August. This means that the base models are 3.5% cheaper than 1 year ago.
So we saw now that 992.1 prices started to turn, but that the effect differs for different model years and that also 992.2 prices started to drop. But that's not all. Prices also turned for older 911 generations, but the older the generation, the less strong the effect.
Looking at the 991.2 generation, we can see that the GTS trend turned and that the trend in the S market is still pointing up. Yet, the confidence interval turned down and median prices declined marginally compared to November. The increase in the base market slowed and prices have been flat. Year-over-year price changes are still positive, but they are no longer statistically confirmed, meaning that they could be the result of chance. In the 991.1 market, we can see that the trends are flat or up, but that prices themselves mainly declined. 4.5% in the base market and 0.9% in the S market. Year-over-year price changes though are still positive at 5.7 and 9.4% respectively. GTS prices though increased during the last 3 months, and the trend has been pointing up since mid-2024. The market is relatively small, but the price increase of 18.6% during last year is fully supported by the data and pushed prices up to record levels. That is, if we ignore inflation. Inflation-adjusted trends show that the GTSs are still 14.5% below their market top of August 21, approximately the same as the other models.
Now the 997 and 996 markets have been behaving independently from the 992 and 991 markets. 2025 price increases and topping patterns in the second half of 2025 don't really apply here.
All 997.2 models have been trending up since 2024. Compared to last year, automatic base models increased by 13.6%, S's by 9%, and GTS's by 11.4%. All of these markets are very small, so statistical tests show that last year's increases could be the result of chance. Increased price uncertainty is illustrated by the confidence interval for the GTS model. It increased especially at the top end, while the bottom value remained relatively flat. It's clear though that prices didn't decrease. 9 and 7.1 prices are still trending up, despite minor weakness in the median prices during the last 3 months. Base models are up by 13.5% and S's by 13.1%. Prices are close to record heights if we ignore inflation. Finally, we have the 9 and 6s. .1 base models are up by 8.4% compared to last year, and .2 base models by 4.9%. The .2s, which of course only contains the 4 S's, are up by 14.2%. Yet, only the increase in the base market is statistically confirmed. Similar to the 997 market, the price development isn't really correlated to the 992 and 991 market.
So we saw now that the 992 market clearly turned, that 991 prices weakened, and that the 997s and 996s are mainly unaffected by all of this. However, it's not only the Carrera market in which this is happening. A few weeks ago we saw that prices are also weakening in the GT3 market. But that's not all.
We can zoom out even further and take a macro perspective on this.
You see, the 911 market is still incredibly strong, but its advantage over the general market evaporated during the second half of 2025.
Over here we have the 3-month price change for all the 911s and the general sports and supercar market, excluding the 911s. Naturally, there's a seasonal pattern in the trend. Moreover, 911s are in general doing better than the market. The red line is above the dark blue line. Now, throughout 2022, 23 and 24, the markets behave fairly similar, but in 2025, the correlation between them decreased massively due to a few factors. First of all, 911s increased much more than the market average, potentially driven by MSRP increases. We can see that the 3-month price change, compared to the ones observed historically, increased much more in the 911 market than in the general market. That's important. The second important factor is that the general market decreased much less after the summer than observed historically. Moreover, at the end of 2025, the 3-month change was close to zero, higher than observed historically and similar as in the spring.
In practice, this means that the price trends for many models flatlined. We saw this for Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLarens and even Maseratis. I extensively discussed this on the channel, so have a look at some of the older videos if you want to know more.
Now, while the general market flatlined, 911 prices weakened and the 3-month change moved towards the negative territory. This means that on average, the 911 market performed the same as the general market during the last few months. Historically though, the two lines never crossed.
Now, as I pointed out in the beginning of the video, yes, the market turned. But we cannot exaggerate what's happening here right now. It's normal for 992 prices to decline, and we just saw that the general 911 market is on point with the general car market. That's hardly a bad result, right?
However, there's an important point of concern in the 992 market that buyers should be aware of. Cars are namely selling extremely slowly compared to their historic selling speed, and that might affect future prices. The selling speed is indicated by the carried over inventory rate. This rate shows the percentage of cars that didn't sell within 3 months. Historically, this fluctuated around 20% for the 992.1, but during February, this rate increased up to 40%, meaning that 40% of the cars that were for sale in February were also for sale in November. This spike is similar to what we saw in the 992 GT3 market. Also there, we're looking at a carried over inventory rate of around 40%, while the average is around 25%.
Now, all of this happened while sellers decreased prices for unsold inventory slightly more than last year.
The discount rate shows the price change for cars that didn't sell within 3 months. This rate has a strong seasonal component. In the winter, unsold cars are typically discounted more than in the summer. We can see that this was 4% in February, while this was 3% 1 year ago. So this means that 40% of the cars that didn't sell were discounted by an average of 4%. The change compared to last year isn't large, but we can see that the rate has been trending down, whereas it was trending up before.
The large change in the carried over inventory rate is a clear sign that the market weakened and that we're not looking at a random change in the price trend. So if we speculate about future prices, all of this means that there's a good chance that prices will continue to fall in the short term.
So what does this mean if you're buying a 911 right now?
The 911 Carrera market has officially turned, not because it's weak, but because it's strong enough to normalize without breaking.
For 992 buyers, this means that their negotiation power increased, especially for the latest model years. Prices are no longer going up, and cars are selling slower than ever before. So keep an eye out for cars that have been on the market for a while, and don't be afraid to negotiate on the price. I know, this isn't a common thing for 911s, but the market really changed compared to last year.
Now, past price behavior can predict future price behavior to some extent. And combining this with the spike in the carried over inventory rate, we can build a speculative case that short-term future prices might continue to fall. So you as a 992 buyer need to be aware of this. Risk-averse buyers could even wait a few months to see if the trend will start to fall quicker than the general market trend.
The position for 991 buyers also increased, but definitely not to the same extent as for 992 buyers. The next few months will reveal if the topping pattern continues and the trend turns, or whether prices will flatline like in the general car market.
On a positive note, it of course also has advantages to be buying into a market that's stable.
But if that is something you want to do, you need to have a good look at the 996s and 997s. These markets move fairly independently of the 991 and 992. Values have been stable for a long time.
In 3 months' time I will upload a new market update and will share with you how all of this unfolded. Will prices indeed continue to fall through the spring? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section.
Now German buyers, I didn't forget about you. The German market though behaves much more in line with expectations than the US one. Not much change compared to the previous market update, so I will give you a new overview in the next 911 Carrera market update.
Now if you like this data-driven approach for analyzing car prices but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you find data-driven market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of that car by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks for a fresh market update.